IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, I'm Sarthak and I welcome you to one more episode of All Things Policy. In this episode, we are going to talk about women's representation in politics in India. For this episode, I have with me my colleague Suman. Suman manages Takshila's graduate certificate in public policy program. Hi Suman, welcome to All Things Policy.
Hi Sarthak, great to be here to discuss this very exciting and interesting topic.
Yeah, so Suman, before we start, why don't you make the announcement that you had for the GCPP program?
Yeah, as most of you know, Takshashila is a public policy research organization as well as an educational institute. We run short-term courses for working professionals. Next cohort for the graduate certificate public policy program begins on 7th May. We have opened applications. The last date for application is 30th April. So I request everyone who's interested in public affairs, anybody who wants to make better sense of the world around you, to go ahead and apply for this course. You will find details of this course on school.takshashila.org.in. So go ahead and apply. With that, we can begin this episode.
Yeah, thanks, Suman. So before we go into the nitty-gritties of women's representation of politics in India, I just wanted to give you a broad overview at how women's representation in politics is there in different parts of the world and how it is in India. Now, if you look at the global data, women are less represented in politics. It's not only with India, world over it is the trend. And women comprise less than 25% of legislators across the world. And if you look at India, again, the number of legislators in the state legislative assemblies or the parliament, it is even less than 25%, right? The number is 7%, 14%, so which is less than 25%. But there is one interesting thing at the lower levels, right? At the level of Panchayati Raj institutions, at the level of the municipalities, here we have a larger representation of women. And again, it's primarily due to the reservation policies that we have. So if you look at the absolute number, we have around 1.3 million Indian women who are elected representatives in the government. But yeah, that also is less as compared to the male representation. Right? So this is how the numbers look like. So Suman, would you like to delve deeper into this?
Yeah, when you firstly on the data itself, when you say worldwide 25%, it's an average. We have to take into consideration that there will be wide variations between countries. So the Nordic countries will have much higher representation, which is negated by, say, the Arabic or other countries which have lower than, really abysmal levels of representation in their parliaments. Right? So entire thing averages out to 25%, which is really bad, considering that women are 50% of the population itself. So, the question that we need to ask is, most politics, most representation revolves around an identity, revolves around some kind of a common idea that people gravitate towards. So, but why is this formation of gender-based political tribes difficult? That is the basic question that is at the heart of representation of women in politics. Actually, Pranay had a note on that he had published. Also, he had it in yesterday's Anticipate the Unintended newsletter, where he talks of, where he's collected data about why why organization around political or around gender is difficult. So political tribes form when there is little interaction across tribes. This is not so for women. Women actually interact across ideologies, etc. They also interact with men as spouses, friends, brothers, etc. So it would be really difficult for us to get a vote based on gender alone. And therefore, parties or tribes that are constantly talking about gender will find it hard to get votes from women themselves, because women are not one homogeneous block, and women do not vote just based on gender. There are various other factors that women also will vote. So the first part of it is kind of clear that gender by itself is not an issue people vote, or people, at least till now, is not an issue that people vote for, right? But having women in politics, having representation of women across in at the highest levels down to the local government levels has huge advantages, which, I mean, I don't think we need to spell out so clearly, but to just make it a little more easy. Yeah. So
But Suman, before going to that, there is one more thing as well, right? When we talk about status of women in politics, right? We have been talking about numbers and how different political formations can be there, and again, which indirectly will lead to greater numbers of women in these political institutions. So this is at one level when we talk about representation. But then there is another thing, right? Even if you have more number of women in politics, there has to be
the
one more thing
outcomes.
that needs to be done, right? Yeah, basically the women who are there in politics, let's say, they should be able to raise the voices, they should be able to raise the
The issues
demands
of
for
mm,
issues of women, right? So that is also important, because maybe there can be a scenario where women are there in politics but they're not able to effectively raise voices, or they're not able to meet the demands of women who are not part of politics.
true. Yeah. And the way to do that, or I mean, while we see that reservation has helped in certain ways, we are not yet sure about how it has affected society in general. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Yeah. So the need for women in politics is very clear, because women bring their own points of view, and the issues, the issues related to women, or the issues related, or the issues affecting women get sorted or get heard, first of all, only when there are more women. And solutions to that also will come about only when you include the important stakeholders to that conversation.
Exactly. So here again, right, there can be different kind of effects, right? One is the thing that we mentioned just now, that women are underrepresented and the number of women in politics is less, right? So if you have policies by which maybe there is greater number of women in politics, it can lead to multiple effects, right? One is acceleration effect. That means if you have more women in politics because of some state intervention, right? Let's say reservation. But even after the reservation is removed, there is a possibility that, again, these women who got elected for the first term, they can get elected again, right? So it is getting accelerated. So without any state support, also
Entrenched.
they might, they might get elected. They might become part of politics, and this is something which has been observed in different state assembly elections in India, also the municipal elections in Mumbai. Apart from that, there is also a possibility of upward electoral progression, right? Maybe the candidates are contesting elections at a lower levels, right? Over a period of time, maybe they will move up the political hierarchy, so as to say. Also, all these things leads to a situation where the female citizens who are not part of the political process right now, they can also participate in the politics, right? They now have more
Yes.
role models, so as to say.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
role model effect is studied all over the world. There are multiple papers that talk about how increasing representation of women does not just improve political prospects for that woman, but because women look to, because women politicians recruit more women grassroots activists, they increase political participation. Okay. So this particular thing I read in another paper by Tanushree Goel. They just illuminate how descriptive representation advances equal participation and help to perpetuate this thing of participation by women in politics or just public affairs. You may not be
Mhm.
contesting elections straight away. You may not be running for office, but participation of women in local affairs, in local public affairs, increases as they see more women getting into politics. I think a lot of it has also got to do with the self-help groups in villages or whatever, because there is a band of women who you are talking, discussing with, and it makes
Yeah.
it easier for women to participate in this.
Yeah. Also, there is this. I mean, it also changes the societal norms, so as to say. I mean, there is again this perception. There are studies among rural communities in India, and there is a perception that women do not have or they lack capacity to be political leaders, or their capacity is not at par with that of male candidates. But when they have female elected officials, there is an exposure to female elected officials, and this can have the potential for these normative changes. And so the rural communities over there, they realize that no, female candidate is equally good, if not better, as compared to a male candidate.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So again, this can lead to greater political participation of female citizens later on. Right. So this is about the numbers, but apart from that, there are other changes also that can happen. Right. The way policies are drafted, the way policies are implemented, there also you can have changes if you have more women in politics. Right. For example, there are studies which find out that if you have female chairperson of a in the local assembly, if you have female chairperson, then gender issues and other different kinds of public services, they are given higher priority. Women's property ownership, property rights, these things are taken care of, or these things are given more attention to. The number of claims filed regarding gender based violence, it also increases. And in India, there have been studies which found out that the female state legislators, they are usually more supportive of different female friendly laws. At the Hindu laws, etc., that were there in the 1950s, 60s, they got support from female state legislators. And it is not just that, there is more investment in public services, right? Public health, public education, improved provision for water and roads. These are certain things which impact everyone. But if female MLAs are there, then there is more investment in these kind of things.
Sure. But what is also seen is that when female representatives bring up gender specific issues, they face a lot of resistance. That is probably because their male counterparts see a threat to their monopoly or to their power, etc. Whereas provisioning of public services is part of everybody's job, right? But when a woman brings up gender issues such as violence or any other such thing, they find a lot of resistance, to take up these issues on a larger scale. And they're always asked to solve this in a out of the public eye
Mhm.
kind of
Informal settlement
informal
mechanisms.
settlements. So that I think is a challenge, or that is one of the consequences or unintended consequences. I don't know if you should call it unintended consequences, but this is one of the side effects or thing of having women in the agenda or the objective of having women in all these public bodies was to bring up gender issues. Now, if they are not allowed to do this, then it kind of defeats, in some ways, defeats the purpose of having them over there. So that to me is a little disconcerting. Yeah. So that's where we are.
Yeah. So, Suman, this is an interesting point when you talk about the power dynamics and how, if women politicians take up some of those things which upset the power hierarchy, and there are pushbacks. And again, something related to it, right? So, there are existing societal norms. Women are expected to be caretakers. And if the women politicians are fulfilling those kind of roles, like when they are in power, let's say they're trying to provide for health, education, and other kind of developmental activities, usually there is not much pushback, right? So what is happening here is women's participation in politics is getting constrained to some extent, right? It's not that they are able to take up all the kinds of roles. So as an independent individual, they are facing different kinds of restrictions. So it again, it basically
I just
raises these questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a point over here in terms of, we are talking about women who, after getting elected, face these kind of challenges. But if you
Yeah.
step back and see, even while they are contesting elections, or even while they are in the fray to, either get elected or get nominated or anything, what has been found is that, especially in the last round of the assembly elections, I found some notes on this. And while women were nominated as candidates, they lacked cadre support from men. Because
Mhm.
again, even the cadre comes from that same societal norms that they
Hmm.
will not take orders from women. So
Yeah.
women are facing challenges even in the process of getting elected. So it
Hmm.
becomes that much more of a challenge to surmount when your own team is not willing to work with you because they see you as a woman and not up to their level. Then it is one new challenge to surmount. And again,
Yeah.
women are not part of electoral campaign strategy. So if I am contesting elections and I don't have a say in how
Hmm.
I will campaign or on my strategy on what I should do to be winning, and it's dictated from the top or dictated by some other men, I am bound to not understand, or I'm bound to be on the weaker side of. So these are some other challenges that
Hmm.
women face even before getting elected into. Once we have crossed all
Hmm.
of this and then make it to the elected body, then there are different
Hmm.
set of challenges that we actually
Yeah.
go
In
through.
fact, getting elected is also a difficult thing because, I mean, there have been surveys, like there was one survey in 2014 which found out that 60% of Indian residents, they reported that, I mean, they believed that men
That
make better political leaders than women, right? So those kind of norms are also there. People assume that women will not make good leaders. So host of challenges that women might face. But now the question is, how effective have all these policies been, right? And again, some of these things, how effective have been the policies in ensuring women's participation, right? At present, we have mostly the reservation at the local levels, right? And all of some of these things we have already discussed, how power dynamics are at play and how are societal norms constraining women's action. Now, apart from this, if you look at the numbers as well, overall, right, overall women are less represented in political institutions. But if you look at those seats, right, where you do not have any reservation in local governments, right, some seats are reserved while others are not. Here
yeah,
also
yeah.
you will find very less representation of women. Hardly 10% of the unreserved
Hmm.
seats are won by women candidates, right? It also points
Yeah,
to the fact that there are multiple systemic challenges. And another way to look at it is look at the representation of women in political parties, maybe, or
yeah.
representation of women in, let's say, the
Leadership
cabinet,
position.
different
Leadership
leadership
positions
positions
within a part
within
in within a
parties.
party.
Yeah, within parties as well, right? Here also women are usually less represented. And not just politics, if you look at administration, bureaucracy, here also, again, the number of women is quite less, like less than one third
Yeah.
of the
So
highest officers will be women.
yeah. So if I mean these are places where you get potential future politicians from. So
Yeah,
if your base itself is underrepresented, I don't see how you will get more political, candidates from a thing other than
exactly.
unless you go through dynastic or whatever, family politics, etc. But our
Yeah,
best bet is to get representatives from the administration, from these other um, political bodies.
yeah. And basically, there has not been a widespread cascading effect in all political spaces when it comes to representation of women. Also, one thing, I mean, this is not about the reservation thing, so as to say, but it's more about the policy design that we have, right? One of the unintended consequence of the policy design that we have, in the sense that we have representation of women through reservation. But again, this is for, I mean, a particular constituency will be reserved for a woman candidate for one term, and then there is a cycle over there. Now, this is how we have designed the policy. And one of the unintended consequences, let's say there is a constituency right now which has not been reserved, but it will be reserved for a female candidate in the next term. So the candidate who is not the candidate, the person who
Currently.
is right now holding that office, right, might not have enough incentives to work. And in fact, that person will have enough incentives to work in such a way that he holds power the next term, right? And the next term
Yeah.
he's not going to be in power himself, someone else is going to be in power. So it leads to, again, the resources being distributed in different ways. Maybe he will favor someone who is that dominant community over there or dominant person over there. So those kind of issues are also there. It's
Yeah,
more
that's
about policy design
policy
rather than
design.
the, yeah.
Yeah, the issue of things. Yeah, but I think the greater challenge for political parties, for everybody concerned, is how to make inclusion an election issue. I mean, currently you see, I mean, you probably see jobs, you will see economy in a broader sense, and your regular caste and religion combinations as election issues. But is there a space for bringing inclusion as an election issue? I think, there, I don't think we are there yet. I mean, we saw it in the recent UP elections where the Congress party actually promised to field some 40% women. Yeah, but that as an issue or that it's by itself did not go anywhere. So how do you make inclusion as an election issue? That is a question I think that we need to think about, and you probably will get some answers on that. But as of now, it looks like it cannot be a standalone issue. It has to be melded with something else that comes along.
Yeah, multiple things are at play. How do you change norms, the prevalent norms that women possibly have less capacity in politics? How do you transform these kind of norms that people have? How do you ensure that women come together and they demonstrate their power? How do you ensure that women act as an agent of change for
For
themselves
change.
and their constituents? Right. So those kind of things needs to be addressed. And on top of that, again, there are different reports which talk about how male family members, they are the ones who are holding on to power through the female relatives,
Proxies
right?
or
So yeah, proxies and all, right? We need to have more data on that, how the dynamics are working here. So all these things needs to be done, needs to be researched. These needs to be studied further.
Yeah, one thing on this family and proxy thing, I have read some reports that say that yes, maybe first generation there will be an overbearing influence of the male member. They call it the Pati Sarpanch phenomenon across. Yeah, but if you look, I mean, there is enough data to show that if representation is combined with an enabling environment around your village or whatever your constituency, such as self-help groups or any other such kind of thing, we see that participation of women and therefore the voice of women is better than if you don't have that enabling environment and you're just putting a token representation. So I think when we're talking about representation, we have to talk about the environment around that too, and then make our considered choices around.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting thought to end our discussion for the day.
Yeah, sure. Interesting, and there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be thought about. I hope we have given the listeners some sort of a thought, and they can come back to us with what they think about it. Thanks, Sarthak. Yeah. Thanks for having us on the show.
Thanks, Suman. Thanks to the audience for plugging in. So we'll meet again in one more episode of All Things Policy.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On The Habit Coach, we've hit our 700th episode. That's 700. Public speaker and professional development guide Tonya Lyon speaks to Ashton about how mindfulness and stillness can be transformative. On Ek Chuski Finance, Priyanka has an interesting story which urges women to take charge of their personal finances. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurav debate whether prohibition is an effective policy when it comes to curbing alcohol consumption. On Audio Gyan, Kedar speaks to Hemant Jha. He is the founder of Honest Structures, and they discuss designing aesthetically enticing products. And on Marathi Khidkitun, the Deshmukhs introduce us to some lesser-known heroes that are working towards the betterment of society. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you enjoyed this show or any of our other shows for that matter, do please tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. You can check us out on YouTube as well. On ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, we have a list of all of our YouTube channels. Do check out if your favorite show is available as full video. We are also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We'd really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app. Thank you so much for making this possible.
हम महिलाएं रोज के कामों में बहुत व्यस्त रहती हैं और हो भी क्यों ना, काम, पढ़ाई और जिम्मेदारियां सभी पूरी करनी जरूरी हैं। पर इन सब के बीच हम जीवन के एक बहुत ही जरूरी पहलू को नजरअंदाज कर देती हैं, फाइनेंस। इसीलिए हम आपके लिए लेकर आए हैं SBI लाइफ प्रस्तुत एक चुस्की फाइनेंस, महिलाओं द्वारा महिलाओं के लिए बनाया गया पॉडकास्ट। यहाँ मैं प्रियंका आचार्य, आपकी होस्ट, आपके साथ शेयर करूंगी कि किस तरह आप अपने फाइनेंसेस को बहुत आसानी से संभाल सकती हैं और फाइनेंशियली इंडिपेंडेंट बन सकती हैं। अपने 14 वर्षों का अनुभव लिए मैं आ रही हूँ हिंदी और अन्य 7 भाषाओं में हर मंगलवार नए एपिसोड्स के साथ IVM पॉडकास्ट नेटवर्क और अन्य चर्चित पॉडकास्ट प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर।